Thanks so much for coming this afternoon. I hope everybody enjoyed the keynote this morning. That's my boss's boss who was presenting this morning and showing you quite a bit of the new things that are coming out in Visual Studio and in the .NET Framework 3.5. Some of the features that I'm going to be showing today were shown in this morning's demo. One of the things he showed was being able to do vendor approval in a Word document that's connected up to a workflow. And in that Word document, he showed a custom task pane that contains both WinForms controls, so the classic controls you've been using for years, and also a WPF control that allowed you to get a 3D view of the product that you're going to be selling in that online food store. I'm not really sure that I'd be buying any produce and fresh fruits and vegetables off of an online store, but I guess the idea is if we demo a company that would never really exist, we wouldn't have any legal issues with showing that kind of demo. Same with Northwind Traders and other fake companies that we use all the time. So good morning, good afternoon. My name is Kristen Boyd. I'm a program manager out of Redmond, Washington. Flew out here to show some of our products to you guys. I'm very excited that my team is almost complete in shipping Visual Studio 2008. It will be ready for you by the end of this month. So you'll be able to download the trial edition of this software and start building applications like this yourself. Additionally, just about every demo that I'm going to be showing today will also work on Visual Studio 2008 Beta 2. So if you have that version installed on your systems right now, because that beta is a free download, you can try out everything that I'm showing today. Some session prerequisites. This is, I believe, a 200 level class. And I'd expect that you have some familiarity with both Office development and Visual Studio development. I understand that it's quite common to have someone who's very experienced in .NET development but hasn't done a lot of Office programming before to come to these sessions. And similarly, I'll get people who know Office inside and out. They'll know Excel inside and out, but they mostly know VBA. And they know a little bit of .NET, so I get a wide range of people in my audience. So let me ask a quick question just so I know who I'm talking to here. Who here considers yourself an Office developer who specializes in VBA? Just a few. How about Office developers who use .NET as your programming language? Excellent. Okay, so I don't have to start out at a really low level for you guys. Sometimes when I go to speak at an individual company, they will have the entire audience will be just VBA or they'll all be C#. But I tend to get a mix in these audiences here. The things I'm going to be talking about this session focuses on the user interface, the different things that you can do with Office 2007 that are part of the visual interface that you can program against. Now these are mostly covered by the ribbon, task panes, and actions panes. The ability to work with document and spreadsheet surface themselves. You can drag and drop controls on there. WPF controls will work just fine in both the task panes, the action panes, and the Outlook form regions. Word content controls, and I have a demonstration of a real-world application that's in prototype phase right now by Dell. And finally, I'll be doing just a really brief overview of Outlook and Outlook form regions because I have a whole other session on Wednesday that talks just about Outlook programming, and I can go into much greater detail in that session about the tricks of working with the user interface in Outlook as you have all of those different multiple inspector windows and the life cycle of the objects inside of Outlook are a little bit different. So to put this into context, the whole reason why we find ourselves developing applications that run inside of Office is that when you purchase these large systems from one of many retailers and you hire a consultant team or you get your own consultants to go out and implement your workflow, your process within your company, you find yourself building a nice clean chart like this. But what happens is for each one of these blocks, let's say create opportunity, there's actually a lot of very ad hoc work that is done by people using telephone, passing documents back and forth either in printed format, faxing them still sometimes, emailing them, or just uploading soft copies of documents between vendors. So a lot of this work tends to happen in a combination of Office applications and telephones, and very often you'll find that you'll have a telephony system built into your email system or possibly built into your line of business system so that you now have all of these things have the capability to be connected together. But a lot of people haven't taken the time to go and build the system that really connects everything together. Mostly because you find yourself using lots of different APIs. It's useful if you build everything in just a few languages and using tools and technologies that allow you to standardize the data between them. So things like LINQ will really come in handy for getting the data around, and things like WPF make it very nice to get great visualizations in any one of these applications. So what I'm going to be showing is how the underlying Office layer has exposed a lot of APIs that developers can then customize. And then on top of that, my team, the Visual Studio team, created a set of designers and wizards that help you visually deal with designing these things. The Office team, for the most part, creates APIs and they ship a product. They don't specialize in creating developer tools. They don't have tools for great IntelliSense, and it's not their core competency to build designers and wizards. So with the two tools together, and we are maybe a quarter mile apart in terms of buildings, their building has a much better cafeteria, so we go over there quite often and communicate and collaborate between our two teams to produce a solution that you can then create. Now inside of Visual Studio Tools for Office, we've done a lot of things to innovate in this cycle. We came out with a new set of visual designers for the ribbon, for task panes, and for Outlook form regions. We allow you to do some very simple data binding, drag and drop with the new Word content control objects, which is something that you saw in the keynote this morning. We have VBA to VSTO interoperability going both directions with IntelliSense to make it much easier for you to combine any of your systems that are written in VBA, either by another department or some legacy code in your company, and be able to connect that with .NET solutions, so you can then use VB.NET or C# to access and integrate your code. We have both application level and document level solutions, and in this same version of Visual Studio, we have all of those solutions for both Office 2003 and Office 2007. We want to make sure that you only need to have one development tool to cover the majority of the Office deployments that exist today and for the next couple of years until the next version of our tool comes out, and then we will make sure we adopt the next version of Office. Click Once deployment is an important integration that we made this year. In the previous versions of Visual Studio, Click Once deployment existed for WinForms applications, but not for your Office solutions. We've managed to make quite a few changes that allow you to use Click Once deployment for your Office solutions, which have a very different security and load behavior. So when you load the DLLs that you produce with Visual Studio Tools for Office, that DLL needs to get trusted by Office in order to allow it to load. So that's a very different deployment scenario than your normal WinForms executable. So we had to make quite a few changes and customize this solution so that you can now do Click Once deployment from a website or from a DVD or from a thumb drive. As a part of Click Once deployment was that secure application domain separation. Office really wants you to operate in your own space, and you want to operate in your very own separate space, separate from, say, the live meeting add-in that's loaded in Outlook. You don't want live meeting to be stepping on your code, and you don't want your code to be stepping on live meeting, even though they're both add-ins that will be running in Outlook at the same time. And finally, the one thing that I'm not going to be covering in this session, just because it doesn't have a whole lot of pretty user interface to it, is workflow and SharePoint support. That will be covered in other sessions, and you did see it this morning in the keynote, so you know that it works and that it's possible. I worked with Tony on getting all those demos working, so that was not in any way a fake demo anywhere. That whole thing was real code. All right, so this is the Fluent user interface. You don't necessarily need to remember the word Fluent, but it's something that we named it. And the idea is that we wanted to create a more intuitive user interface. So that's the new ribbon, and the way that the ribbon has multiple tabs and groups, the way that it can shrink and grow, and the buttons can go to smaller sizes if you shrink your window. So that's the Fluent user interface. Now the other key aspect of this is that you can have a task pane, and it doesn't always have to be on the right. It can be docked or floating, and it can be docked on left, right, top, bottom. Now let's get into some details of how you build these things. So this is the Fluent ribbon, and here's some basic terminology for you. I'm just curious, how many of you have already built your own custom ribbon? It looks like about half. Okay, so I should still cover how to do this. And here's some common terms. Most people refer to, they call everything a ribbon. They say, I'm building a ribbon and my ribbon isn't showing. And so whenever I'm in the forum and I'm helping people troubleshoot, I say, okay, so what part is not showing for you? Now the ribbon is showing, right? You can still see other buttons there. So is it your tab that you're not seeing, or your group that you're not seeing, or your control? So here's the different elements and how they all fit together. Now, in the way that the ribbon X, which is the XML model that is exposed by the Office team, ribbon X works in such a way that you can add your own tabs, you can add your own groups, and you can add controls to your groups, but you cannot add your controls to built-in groups. So that means that you cannot add your control to the font group that already exists. You would have to create my font group, and then you can add your controls to it. And that was a decision that was made by the Office team to help. The idea was they didn't want to confuse users by having them not understand the difference between where are my custom add-ins and which ones come from Microsoft. It does make things easier when somebody eventually has to call tech support. I started my career at Microsoft tech support, so I'm always very concerned about what their life is going to be like. So in terms of ribbon customization, in Visual Studio 2008, we give you a complete visual designer that allows you to customize your controls and set your properties. We also have the ability to use the visual designer, and when you're all done with the visual designer, if you prefer to work in XML from there on in, you can export your design to XML. And it's a one-way, and it just spits out all of the XML that you need, and then you can continue to work only in XML at that point. In previous versions of Visual Studio, in Visual Studio Tools for Office 2005, second edition, in that version, we did not have a visual designer, but we just gave you some XML to start out with, and then you can start coding from there. So if any of you have used the previous version, how many of you used the second edition product to develop for Office 2007? Great, thank you. Click. There we go. All right, so here's what the designer looks like. I'll be showing you a demo in a moment. I like putting screenshots in my PowerPoint deck so that when you go home and show it to people, you don't have to have the product installed, because I'm sure you're all ambassadors for your team. You had the privilege to come to Barcelona for this event, not just for the food, but to come home with some great slides to train the rest of your team. Maybe you'll bring back some chocolate for them. So here we are in the Visual Studio 2008 Ribbon Designer. And what you get is you get this nice design surface that looks like a tab. Now, you don't see all of the built-in tabs. You just see the things that you're building in your design surface. That way, it helps you understand what do I have control over and what is already built into the system. And then for each one of these objects that you click on, we have a very detailed property grid. Now, this property grid, for the most part, emulates the XML that will eventually be produced. And then on the left-hand side, we have all of your graphical elements that you can drag and drop your buttons onto the screen and move things around in the designer. We also have shortcut keys for all of this, so you could do it all by keyboard. That's also part of our accessibility for like blind developers and such. So let's take a look at how this works. Let's wake up my computer and go to computer number 3. All right. So in this scenario, I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm making a template solution. And inside of this, is it a template or a spreadsheet? It's a spreadsheet solution. And inside of the spreadsheet solution, we have, you can see that Excel has been loaded into the design environment, but this is not where I designed my ribbon. This is just where I designed the body of my document. So here's my document. I have a couple of elements here that are all named, and then I can program against them. And then inside of my ribbon designer, so here's my ribbon designer, and you get this by saying right-click, add new item, and then you select the ribbon visual designer, and that's how you get the blank ribbon designer added to your screen. And then once that's there, you can start customizing this. Now, a few things that we've done. At the very highest level, if I select on the main outside area of the ribbon, I have a couple of properties that I've set on the overall ribbon that I'm designing. One of them is called Start from Scratch. Now, start from scratch means take away all of the existing tabs so that I can only show my end user the buttons that I want to show them. This is very useful if you're building a template or a document solution and you want to really limit the things that your user can do. Now, this is not necessarily secure because your end user might be able to go in, modify the XML themselves, reload the document, and then it'll work the way they want it to. But they'd have to be pretty smart to figure that out. This is designed just so that you can give your users a simplified interface to help them understand a particular task that you're trying to accomplish. At the next level, I select the tab object, and you can see here that I have my ribbon.ribbon tab object selected. And in here, one of the important things that I've done is I've changed the control ID type. Now, there's two subtypes to the control ID type. One is I have two options of either custom or office. And if I say custom, that means that I'm creating my very own tab with my own name on it, and I have full control over everything that's going on in that tab. In another demo, I'll show you that I'm using the Office tab, and then I can put my control into one of the various built-in Office tabs. So I can put things into the View tab, the Data tab, the Home tab, or there's this other tab called Add-ins generically. Now, if you have any older applications, such as an application you built for Office 2003, and you've loaded that solution into Office 2007, all of the command buttons, the command bars that you created for your Office 2003 solution will show up in that Add-ins tab. So that means that when I run Outlook and a little bit later in my demo, you'll be able to see that there's a bunch of buttons showing up inside of the Add-ins tab that were from older solutions that I'm running on my system. So that's one of the built-in tab that's available for third-party buttons, or you can create your own third-party tab and name it whatever you want. And then inside of there I have my group objects, and group objects are pretty simple. For the most part, I just give it a name and leave it in the default. And then for each one of these objects, I can see them over here in my toolbox. Here are all of the Office ribbon controls, and I have one of each of them thrown onto this screen. And I'll show you how this thing works. And I do have a breakpoint set in here. So on my breakpoint, when I go to the gallery object and I click on something, I'll hit a breakpoint in my code. All right, so we have this simple spreadsheet solution where, because I said start from scratch, I don't get any of the other ribbon tabs. I just have my own. I can change the happy smiley face over here into a sad face. Over here where it says alignment, I can do some things where I change the alignment. I can change my bar graph to a column graph. So these are the different types of objects. I have drop-down list boxes, where this is a combo box. I have pictures and words. The gallery control is nice because I get all of these different objects. Let's make it purple. And I'm going to go to my breakpoint where I'm saving my image. I'm going to go through a couple of things. I'm just going to grab the old image, grab it out of the file system, and then I'm going to pass in these variables about height and width and color, delete my old one, and pass in the new one. So now it knows to show purple in this diagram. The dynamic menu is fun because right now there's nothing in the dynamic menu. It just says, is there anything in here? Nope, nothing in here, so there's nothing listed. So now I'm going to select button and submenu, and now button and submenu appear. So this is an example of, at runtime, you can add additional items to your ribbon. And there's my submenu button. Nice picture, got some bold and non-bolded text. So this is an example of all the different kinds of things you can do with the ribbon. Now, it's very easy for me to go back to my code. As long as I remember to remove the write protection from my document, I'll be able to do this. So if I go to my ribbon, and I select the main object, and I remove the start from scratch. Currently it's true if I set it to false. And and then I run this again. And I will see all of the tabs, including my ribbon sample control, which is way over here on the right. Now, if I wanted to, I could move that tab to be over here by setting the position value of the tab. So you have very fine-grained control over where you put your user interface inside of the Office, inside of Office. You can also do this inside each one of the Outlook Inspector windows. So inside of each Outlook Inspector window, they have their own set of ribbon and tabs and controls, and you can customize that at the fine level of detail. So you can only add a tab inside of an email compose or only inside of an RSS read. So you have a lot of control over exactly where you put your user interface. What was the last thing I wanted to show? So leading into my next topic, here's this button that selects Show Actions pane. So when I show this Actions pane and hide it, I have this Actions pane showing up on the bottom. More often, you've probably seen demos where the Actions pane shows up on the right. Just wanted to let you know that you have more control over exactly where you want to put it. Some people put their Actions pane on the top and make it very narrow, and that way it looks just like the old-fashioned button bar. If they really loved the command bar and want to bring that feature back, I've seen people mock it up using a task pane or an Actions pane up on the top part of the screen. I saw a demo once where a guy tried to make a Windows application look like a Macintosh application by making this command bar on the top, and he loaded in all these different images. It was pretty funny. I don't think I have the legal visual rights over those trademark things to show that in a real demo, but it was cool. So like I said, the next topic that I'm going to be showing is Actions pane and Task panes. So Actions panes and Task panes, they're a little bit different, and it can be very confusing between the two of them. You'll find yourself in code, it becomes very clear when talking about it, people tend to say one, mean the other. That's all right, don't worry about it. For the most part, they look the same. The programming model is different, and this is why most end users don't know the difference. So an end user sees a region of code where you typically have a bunch of WinForms controls. You can also put WPF controls in here. Now, the difference is that the Actions pane is associated with a specific Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or a template of either type. Now, that Actions pane only travels along with and only gets loaded when that file gets loaded. So it's a two-step process. When the file gets loaded, it checks the registry. It says, I also need an add-in for this document. It checks the manifest, and then it finds out exactly where it needs to find the DLL that's associated with this spreadsheet or Word document. And then it loads up my Actions pane. Similarly, the custom task pane, but that gets loaded every time you launch Word, every time you launch Excel. And so that way you have code that persists across every document that you might want to edit. This is also the way that you work in Outlook, because there's no such thing as a document in Outlook. It's just one big application. So in that case, you build a custom task pane instead of an action pane in Outlook. And so I've got a slide coming up that sort of explains which is which, a little bit of a comparison chart. The other thing to make note of is that the task pane is its application level, but it's only new in Office 2007. The Actions pane works in previous version of Office, 2003 and 2007, and it will continue to be an interface in the future. So that's the list of exactly what and where. The other thing about the persistence models, so the Actions pane gets loaded when the document gets loaded up, unless you code it to create it later on. So you can only even get to it when that document is loaded, but then you in your code can decide exactly when you want to create a new instance of your Actions pane. So you have control over, you can make the lifespan of your Actions pane shorter than the lifespan of that document, or it can be brought up on start and closed on shutdown. Now, with the custom task pane, you can create that for every document you open, or just for some of them, and you can write your own code to say, now make an instance of my custom task pane, now clean up my custom task pane. Or you can have it created on startup, and it automatically gets cleaned up for you on shutdown. Now, there's another trick to this, and that is the task pane is associated with the window and the application. So Excel and PowerPoint create one application, and then inside they will create their own window for each PowerPoint deck you're working on. for each spreadsheet you're working on. These other applications, InfoPath, Outlook, and Word, create a whole new instance of the window every time you want to create a task pane. Or excuse me, they always just create a new version of the window every time you open up a new file. Every time you open up a new email, that is a new parent window. And that new parent window would have to have its own task pane created for it. Each new Word document is its own parent window. And if you want to create a task pane, one of the parameters to creating a new custom task pane is the parent window. So we have some sample code that ships with Visual Studio 2008 that shows you how to control the lifespan of your, oh, I have a little bit, it overlaps my words a little bit. Does it say anything important? It's dependent on the difference between MDI, multiple document interface, and SDI, single document interface. That's the part that's overwritten there. All right, so let's take a look at Excel and Outlook to get a good idea of what's going on here. So the first thing I'm going to show, computer 3. So what I have here is, this is my WPF control that I have inside of the element host. So very similar to what you saw in the keynote today. I created a new actions pane object by saying add new item, actions pane control, so actions pane control 2. And to this, I added the WPF element host. I'm going to dock this in the parent container, and then I just simply add, I have another project loaded into this solution that is a WPF control, and I can select that. Now, just because I did a little bit of formatting earlier, I'll show you what actions pane control 1 already contains. It's been nicely formatted, got all the little details worked out, and so this will launch nicely. Now, in this case, this is an actions pane in Excel. And I have this so that it doesn't load up when I first bring up the window. Often you don't want to show your user all of your fancy extra user interface when they first load the application. You often want to give the user control over when they want to show it. So I can go to this add-ins, and here's my show WPF control from TechEd. And like I said, this is the built-in add-ins tab. So here is my live meeting information. So live meeting is an application that comes from Microsoft. This is Live Meeting 2005. Which was originally designed to target the Office 2003 products. And because it created this skinny little button bar, it now shows up in my add-ins tab next to the tab that I created in the group TechEd. And so here is my WPF control. It shows up nicely. It resizes well because it's a nice WPF control. So it says hide WPF, show WPF. And so that's a simple example of my ribbon code is communicating with my document actions pane. I'm creating the document actions pane and the WPF control on the fly when I click on this. Actually, I create it once and then I just hide and show it. That way I'm not reloading my WPF control every single time, especially if there was more animation or more 3D to this. So the source code behind this is pretty simple. Inside of my ribbon control, there's my events. It's a little trick, Alt-Shift-Enter gives you the full width of the screen. So on ribbon load, I'm going to say this workbook, actions pane controls add, and then here's the name of my actions pane, which I declared up here, dim my actions pane. Just curious, how many VB programmers in the room? Okay, you guys are very happy I'm showing this in VB. The rest of you guys could care less, right? You can read this. It says dim. It means dimension. It's okay. And then I say what kind of docking style I want to use. So I'm going to say dock style on the bottom. And then I'm just going to say, don't display it just yet. So this is in my ribbon load, and the ribbon load happens when you first load up the ribbon, when the application starts, or when this spreadsheet starts. And then I have my toggle button click event. So when it's checked, show it, and change the label of my button. And when I untoggle my button, don't show it, and change the text. Very simple. So that's an example of an actions pane. So now let's show a custom task pane. So let's close this solution. Now I'm going to show something interesting. Now this is going to be an Outlook custom task pane. And Outlook is one of those applications that creates a new parent window for almost every object that you're dealing with inside of Outlook. It's a single document interface. If I were to create a custom task pane in Excel, it's very simple. There is one window in Excel for every spreadsheet you open, so you don't have to create a new task pane every time and handle window close, window show, window hide events as people have multiple documents open. So for Excel, it's extremely easy. So let's show this file, open. Okay, so here's my Amazon Web Service. Let's see which language I wrote this one in. Oh, look, VB again. Okay, so in this case, instead of having my own design surface when I said add new actions pane, this time instead of creating an actions pane, I said add new user control. And so here's my user control object. And then on here, I just grabbed all of my components, text boxes and buttons. It's got to have a logo because I am calling the official Amazon Web Service. Got my little trademark down there, no infringements. And then I've got all my code behind this, where I call out to my web service. I say I want to grab books, take the value from the text box, pass in my unique ID from joining the Amazon Web Service tool, and then I eventually pull back some data and display it in a list box. And then once I've got that in a list box, I want to add that to the body of my email where I say, here's some recommended books from Amazon, and I will grab the author and all kinds of other pieces of information and put all of this code into my email. Now, this file doesn't care who my parent window is. This code just knows I'm going to be putting this into whatever this is. So I'm going to say, here we go. Global application, this application, whatever the active inspector window is, grab the current item. And I'm assuming that it's going to be a mail item, and if it's not, then I have a problem. Otherwise, I'm going to insert the information right into the HTML body of my mail item. So all I care about is whatever the active inspector window is. That's what I care about here. Now the other part where I care about which window am I dealing with has to do with where I want the whole task pane to show up, not just this user control. So the user control is a part of the overall pane. So here I am in this code, this addin.vb. So I have now what I did was I grabbed a bunch of sample code right out of the help documentation. That's the way that I cheat and make sure that the code is good. So I grabbed some help documentation that says, all right, so I'm going to be dealing with task panes in Outlook, and I want to be able to deal with all of the different inspector windows opening and closing and multiple being open at the same time. So I'm going to watch for inspector events and keep track of each task pane. So I grabbed all of this sample code, which is then going to go through and allows the user control visibility of the task pane once the window is opened. But every time you open up a new one, we're not just going to remember whatever the last task pane situation was. We want to keep it hidden for every new inspector window that the user opens, and only show it to the user when they want it. Otherwise, they'll find it very annoying. Why does this thing keep popping up? I don't want to buy stuff from Amazon every day. So we're keeping track of that by saying only when I click on the button. Otherwise, hide it. So on startup, I want to initialize my event, and then I'm just going to keep track of all of my inspectors and my inspector wrappers. Back to full screen. All right, now the fun part about this is you're going to see my real inbox and see how many unread email messages I have. Okay. So I want this to work on, here's my new inspector window. And in the add-ins tab, I have my Amazon show task pane. And then I can run off and do a search. And we'll see how good the internet connection is on the podium up here. Oh, that's not good. Well, it's not like I'm demoing web services. Let's just show you how, if I then open up another new message, I don't get the task pane until I ask for it. And if I do reply, and again, I only see it when I ask for it. Otherwise, it would have remembered it, and I would have gotten that Amazon task pane for every subsequent window that I opened up. And a lot of end users just go, I don't know why this thing keeps happening, and I don't know how to make it go away. At least that's what happens every time I call home, and my dad is trying to figure out how to deal with his Outlook. I mean, he's got a PhD, but he's not in software. So I'm always doing tech support for him. Now, let's see. Let's move back to the PowerPoints. All right. Multiple document interface and the single document interface. It's a little bit more complicated in the single document interface, but we do have sample code that comes with the product, but in both C# and VB in the help documents that allow you to work with the single document interface. Now, the next major thing that I'm going to show you is the word content controls. Now, this was shown very briefly in the keynote, where you have these word content control objects that are available in the toolbox, and you're able to put them into your Word document, whether you're working with a document or a template file. As a part of this object model, you then have the toolbox for drag and drop. You have the property grid for setting various values, including all of the events available. There's a lot of great events here, so you can do a lot of validation on enter, on exit, validated, validating. Thought we've really covered the bases here for the different types of events that people work with. Now, a lot of the advice we got on how to build this were about how we dealt with the people used bookmarks and they used smart tags in the past. And they gave us a lot of feedback about which events they wanted around those two objects. And we incorporated all of that feedback into these word content controls. And then we went a step further and gave you formatting, list boxes, combo boxes, and the date time picker. And then, of course, you get IntelliSense with this. And you get two-way simple data binding. So simple data binding means that if you're just grabbing data from a table, that's fine. But if you've got links and joins with that table, that doesn't get handled very well in this version. We're working on that for the future. So for the simple data binding, it's very easy. For more complicated stuff, you'll have to write a little bit of your own code, which is what some of the folks here have done to handle more complex data types. So let's get into a more real-world demo. It's a lot bigger code base than what I've been showing thus far. So I'm going to invite Vasu and Joel up to the stage and allow them to show their demonstration. Okay. So this goes forward. Don't touch that or that.
Sure. Hello. My name is Vasu Mekala. I work for Dell Computers as a solution architect.
And here with me is Joel Holder. He's a guy who actually wrote the code. So I'm going to let him do the demo. I'll talk about what we're doing current state today and what the proposed architecture is. Uh, the current state architecture, which I'm going to show you, which I'm not going to show you, is cutting edge technology back in like 7-8 years ago. And today, we'll show you what real cutting edge is with the new Office system. So diving into what the solution is today, we have some runtime data. So this project is about customer interactions. So any interaction we do with the customer, we leverage the system. So like when we send a quotation or we send an order confirmation or whatever it is, when you register on the website, the My Account email, all this is built on this technology back in like 8-9 years ago. We have the runtime data, which is basically the customer information, like his name, his address, and whatever system they're buying. And we have some static data, which is basically the like Mr. First name, last name, street, welcome text, which doesn't change much. But that's static data. So we have these two XMLs, and what we do is we run through a style sheet, an XSLT, to get the end result, which is this. And we email that customer interactions to the customer, or fax it, or print it and mail it physically. So what is the problem, right? There you go. So what are the limitations? It's not more of a problem. It could be a problem, but let's see. So first thing, we can't build a business process around the whole system, so that's a big problem to business. Why is it a big problem? Today, if they need to change something, say for example, some of the welcome text, right? They want to change that, or there's a legal birdseed that the legal department says you need to go change that. The way it works today is that data is in the static XML data, right? And we have to change that data, push it through environments like development, SIT, and production. And it has to do it only on the release date. So when we release a product, that's when all these changes goes. Business can't do it real time. So that's a big problem. Here, so there's no good authoring tool out there for XSLT. I can go and change, or business can go and change an XSLT. It's a big problem too. So that's the reason we have to do everything in a release. There's no workflow, and creating workflow is writing a lot of custom code, a lot of resources, a lot of time, all that problem. And I'll show you how the Office system, the whole Office system, like the Microsoft Office and the SharePoint server, helps us in versioning, in workflow, and rollback, stuff like that. This is another big problem. There's no clear separation between the content and the code, right? So anytime we want to change something, we have to change either the XSLT or we need to change the XML, the static data. So multi-formatting. Today, we send out emails as a plain text, the HTML as this shows. We send out PDFs for proposals. We send XPS, the new format from Microsoft. And every output requires a new XSLT, and that's a lot of time consuming and a lot of resources. So feature proofing, there's no feature proofing with, and at the end of the day, we don't have a good ecosystem for customer interactions. So we looked at Office 2007 when the Microsoft Open XML was announced like a year and a half ago, and basically looked at the whole system and saw a solution here. And this solution, the Dell customer interaction solution, is based off this new Microsoft Open Office XML. So this is how the new architecture looks like. So we use Word as the authoring tool. So the business can author any interactions they want using Word. which they are very, very familiar with. And SharePoint 2007 is basically the content management. All the content, anything the customer interaction is, the content basically lives on the SharePoint. And SharePoint provides workflow out of the box. So we didn't have to write any custom code at all. It's all out of box solution. So if you look at the end email here at the bottom, so for reusability, like any customer interaction, it requires the address, right? If it's a quotation email or an order confirmation or whatever it is, there is basically an address, customer address, billing address, shipping address. So for reusability, what we did was we divided the end result into multiple document parts. So you see two document parts there. So the business would it's up to the business how they want to do it. So we divide as an IT. The recommendation was divide the email into multiple document parts and reuse those parts in different customer interactions. So we have the document parts, and then and we have the word part, which is the whole interaction. So this is how the new architecture is. So design time, we have Word, like I just said, Word as an authoring tool. You author the document parts or the document itself, and that gets checked in into SharePoint. This is all programmatical using the custom tags pane, the ribbon, and all, which Joel is going to do the demo. Once the content is checked into SharePoint programmatically, the workflow kicks in, and then it does whatever it has to do. And this is the design time, right? So at the runtime, here we have any client. It could be a smart client, a web service, it could be a web application. Any client can pull that Word interaction from the SharePoint. At runtime, we have the same runtime payload. So we run through these two. We merge these two using the content controls. If anybody knows the open Office XML specs, you can add in a custom XML. You can unpackage a document and repackage it with the new payload, and you open the document, the data get merged. So that's the power, that's the underlying enabler for this solution. And then you get the output. So the beauty of it for this runtime is we don't need to write custom code to output in multiple formats. Word has an add-in for PDF and XPF. All we do is we open a Word instance on the client, or if it's on the server side, you use the doc generation from the SharePoint, document generation, and that will output whatever format you want. So here is the workflow. So when business wants to create a new customer interaction, so what we do is the business will tell us what kind of data goes into the customer interaction, and the IT comes up with a payload. So we create an XML, which is an abstracted version, and then the business creates those document parts, like the one shown here, and then they create the end customer interaction, whatever. They take the document parts and they create a whole customer interaction, and the runtime client, like we just saw, will output to whatever format we want, or the customer wants. So I'm going to hand over this to Joel, and he's going to show you the real code. This code, the entire thing, what you're going to see was written in 2 weeks, flat 2 weeks. So it's a lot of code, a lot of stuff. Thank you. So you won't see any fancy UI here because we have written the entire thing in 2 weeks. And we'll show you, what we're going to show you is the end-to-end, how to design a document part, how to design a document itself, how does it check in, and how does the workflow kicks off. And we've written a WPF runtime client to demonstrate how we merge the payload, which is the runtime data, with the document that we're going to create, and you see the output. We can format any output. Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, I think it's important that we show you guys that all of our documents are stored in a SharePoint library that we call Dell Messaging Templates. Basically, these serve as the document model that the XML payload will be designed against and also merged into at runtime. So in the SharePoint, in this SharePoint site, we have our messaging templates library, and then we also have a library of document parts. And we've got several already in here. Any new ones that we add or create will show up at the bottom here, and I'll show you those in a moment. And then additionally, we have some payloads, some document object models in XML that we are going to use as our both our baseline for designing these document templates, and also as to merge the runtime data of the same form into. So what I've got here is basically an actions pane loaded up here with a list view full of document parts that we have previously created. Additionally, I have some other content here that has some document parts and laid out in a table here. But I'm going to get rid of all of this. We're basically going to start from scratch, and we're going to create a new document part. So the first thing I'm going to do is, in this ribbon control, I have a button that will load an actions or a custom pane on the left-hand side. So now I have a custom pane on the left-hand side and the actions pane on the right-hand side. In this pane on the left, we see that I have a tree view and the XML document loaded up inside of it. So thinking about some useful content that I might want to make for my users that would be reusable across lots of different kinds of documents, the first thing I would do is most likely add some layout. So maybe I want about 6 rows to cite this content within, and then maybe this would be a billing address document part. So, we're going to basically drill down in our control over here to the billing address area. And, you can see that I've got the data points here. So the first thing I would probably want to do is add a header and put, what this is going to be inside of it. Oops. Use Word to help me lay this out and make it look a little better. Something like that. And then I need to make a conscious decision about what I want this to look like to the end user. Maybe I want to have labels on the left-hand side and the dynamic data for that label on the right-hand side. So I'll go ahead and put in a column directly to the right. And this will give me the beginnings of my layout here. Oh, and I probably want to merge these. There we go. So here, I'll put the first name, then the last name, the address, city, state. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to drag and drop tree view nodes from my task pane onto the document, and where I drop it, we're actually writing the markup that will create for us a content control that points back in the XML document to that location. So I'll cite the first name, the last, go down, find street 1 from address, the city, and the state. So go ahead and clean it up here a little bit. And this gives me the basis for this reusable content. Now, we need to save this content in a centralized place so that it can be used in documents other than the one that this is currently on. So as I showed you, we have a SharePoint library that holds these. So I'll go ahead and send this up to SharePoint through a web service that we wrote. I'll name it. And in just a minute, we'll get a notification that it was successfully saved. Now, on the right here, I have the list of all of the available content controls that are the available document parts that we had currently saved or previously. So now, if I refresh this list and then scroll over, I do see my new billing address right here. So now I have the capability of adding this to as many documents other than this one, or this one if something were to occur multiple times, as I would want.
Let's go and create a new interaction.
Sure. So what we'll do is go ahead and start over, and we'll create a brand new one. And we'll grab some parts that we've previously created to build an entire customer-facing document. So again, we're going to want to give ourselves some layout. And we'll begin by dropping into place a content block that we have called Product Nav. So basically, we don't have internet here, do we? No, we don't. Okay. So the images are not showing up. We're actually linking these out onto the web. But the next piece of content we'd probably want to add is the content block, and Vasu has showed an example of that. We'll add a quote information block. We'll add a customer information block. We'll add a detail document part, which basically will give us all of the line items that are going to show up in this particular quote that we're doing. An important things to know block. And then finally, the legal birdseed. And that's actually on the next page. There we go. Okay. So we've got the makings of a document, but if you look here, you'll see that we still have test data in all of these content controls. They're not actually populated with production data. So what we want to do is go ahead and save this document off to SharePoint, and we'll go ahead and save it, and then close Word. And just to show you guys very quickly here, we do have in the library the content block that we created. It's right here, categorized according to some of the metadata that Dell uses for doing this processing in the business. So now we want to actually consume this document and merge customer data into it. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll specify the metadata that we want to use to give us a list back of documents that we can produce. And here we go. So these are real templates from the SharePoint library that we have saved. And we'll go ahead and select one. And when we make this selection, what's actually happening now is we make a call off to get the actual template, the actual document. We pull it down onto the box. We get the XML payload, and we open up the document programmatically, inject the XML payload as a custom XML part, and then render it as an XPS document here into this XPS viewer that you now see. And there we go. So we have all of the pieces that we have added. We have new data that's showing up here that wasn't in the old one. We had test for those nodes. And we have the detail information. So finally, what this allows us to do then is to use the multiple format outputting capabilities of Word to select what format we want this document to be in when we deliver it to the customer. And so, PDF, HTML, Word, XPS, whatever the customer prefers is how they can receive this document. So what we're doing now is we're actually rendering this as a PDF, and if all goes well, it'll open up and show us that, in fact, it is a PDF in a moment. There we go. So what you can see is that we've tried to put together an end-to-end system that allows non-technical business users to author content that they need to put into the hands of customers for various business purposes, and without having to know XSLT, without having to get a developer involved beyond publishing the payload to them. And they're able to do this design, and then other developers or groups of developers within your organization can then very easily hook into this system to produce the data, and then you have the system now that can produce customer-facing output with that data. So
we're going to hang around here after the session. If anybody has any questions or you want to look at code or something, we'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks. That was a great demo. They've been working on that, like you said, for a couple of weeks now. And it's in a very strong prototype. They've been showing that to quite a lot of people within the company. And the one thing they didn't mention is because of the way that it's all authored as nice content blocks, the whole system is localizable very easily by the business users. They don't have to be involved at all in the IT department side of localizing unless you get into the left and right languages, in which case that should be very simple fix. Because all of our content controls do handle left and right languages and Chinese. In fact, one of the main designers of the WPF controls is she speaks Chinese, Japanese, and English, so she tested the heck out of that product. Also, she reported bugs about there are like 5 different ways you can represent dates in Chinese, and made sure that they all worked in the Word content control date time picker. It was very important to her that she could use the traditional year of the animal, whatever stuff. And so apparently in personal letters, it's very important to some customers to give them the old-fashioned format of date. It's a very business important feature that affects the way that they interact with their customers. So very important. All right. In our last 15 minutes, let's talk a little bit about Outlook form regions. Now, I need to specify a couple of things. First, this is new in Outlook 2007. You weren't really able to program against these very well previously. And second, we use the word form in a lot of different places. Now, this is not in any way meant to change or replace InfoPath, because when we say form, this is really what we mean. So when you open up a contact in Outlook, you get this form that is your contact. And then you have a couple different ways you can do it. Does anybody ever use the other pages that are available in Contact? There's actually a, more information. There's a details page where you can enter spouse's name, anniversary, kids' names, kids' birthdays. These are really important if you're the type of salesman who needs to remember all of the personal things about your customer, so that when you shake hands with them every 2 years to re-sign their contract, you say, hey, how's your son doing in Little League? How's everybody? Oh, he won his football game? That's great. Yeah, little Joey. Okay. So those kinds of things are the forms that are available inside of Outlook. Now, it's the same thing with an email. The email form is very simple. It's just a big blank space in the middle, and you're used to that. But at the top, there's a form that is to CC, BCC, add attachments, whatever interface is at the top there. That's also an Outlook form. Now, these forms are customizable with a technology called Outlook Form Regions, and there's a couple of different ways that you can program against that. So Outlook Form Regions. So VSTO makes it a lot easier to develop these solutions and allows you to use WPF controls in them. If you use the out-of-the-box designer that comes in Outlook itself, you can't get to WPF controls, and you don't really get the .NET object model and the data types translated for you properly. So what VSTO does on top of the Outlook model itself is it gives you these things. You get your manifest gets created for you, and all of your registry settings get created for you. You get a visual designer, so you can drag and drop, similar to creating a WinForms control or anything else in the Visual Studio WinForms world. You also get to deal with WPF controls using that element host that we saw previously, and you can put data-bound controls in here that connect out to third-party databases or to any one of your web services to a line of business application. So then you don't have to handle all of that XML, and you don't have to deal with the OFS files, which is the Outlook created Outlook Forms sheets. I don't remember what the S stands for. You get to work with the debugger in IntelliSense, which you don't get to do if you just built it right out of the raw Outlook designer. And finally, you get the Click Once publication wizard. So I'm going to show you a quick demo just because I have the time. Okay, close this one and open. All right, now in this Outlook project, we have a couple of elements. We're using both standard WinForms controls, and we're also going to use some WPF controls. And then I also have a couple of OFS files that I've loaded in so that I can either import or create them directly from scratch. So in order to create a WPF control, say add new item. And one of the things you might want to work with is the Outlook Form Regions. So if I select Outlook Form Region, now the first thing that I get in my wizard is, would you like to design this using the Windows Designer, or would you like to import an OFS file? So I'm going to start out with importing this OFS file, and I'm going to browse to it, and I should be able to find it right here on my drive. Okay, so there's my OFS file. And this is going to show up as, actually I'm going to do a replace. For my contacts, and I'm going to call this IPM.contact.internteched. So now once I'm in there, I can write some code against that. Oops, field chooser. So here's my form region, and now I can start writing code that deals with objects inside of my form region. And I'll be showing this in more detail in my other session. Now the other piece that I'm going to show you is I also have a user control, and inside of this user control I have a grid at the top, and I have a web control at the bottom, and The grid is going to be pulling out of Northwind dataset, and then the web page is going to navigate to whatever item I have selected in the top piece of this. And then the third type of form region that I've created is this WPF form region, and that's actually known to happen because I haven't built the solution yet. Build. Okay. Now it shows up because I built the project and it was able to find it. Okay, so there's another form region. Now this form region, I have the properties set to form region 1. So I have the properties of this one set to display only in certain cases. So I have this set to display only as an adjoining form region, which means it shows up at the bottom of the page. And it only shows up when I'm in compose mode. Show inspector, excuse me, not compose, only in read and in the reading pane. So these are all values that I set in the wizard when I first created this, and here it is in the manifest showing me exactly where this stuff is going to show up. So for my last demo, there's going to be 3 different types of form regions that I'm going to be able to show you here in Outlook. The first one is inside of a normal contact. So if I go to any contact, I guess I better use one that's not real. Okay, so we're going to look up the sales leads of Stephen Boyd. All right, and much like in the previous demo, we are having internet connection problems, so you're not able to see the bottom half of the screen. But what's happening in the top half is I'm able to select a set of addresses, and what you should be able to do is then get a map showing you where that address is on the bottom part of the screen. So this is an example of a separate form region. So on the basic form region, I get to see my normal built-in contact form. I get the details here with the spouse, birthdays, and information. And then I've added another whole form region, it's called a separate form region, that contains a bunch of additional data associated with this sales rep. Now, another thing that I can do is I can open up a new and choose form. So I created that replace form. So if I choose form, and here's my tech ed, form region tech ed, and I can open that up. And this is something that I created and didn't create terribly well, but it shows you for sure that this is not one of the built-in ones, where I have a notes field and a picture control, and I can customize this. So in addition to what I've done is I've replaced the primary customers, the primary form region of the contact object, and I still have all of the other form regions. So the details are the same, the activities, and the additional one that I added in this control as well. So I have multiple form regions showing up here. And then the final piece of form region that I wanted to show you was in mail, and only when I get mail from a Hotmail address, I'll get that WPF control to show up as a form region that shows up on the bottom of the window. And this is expandable and collapsible by the user. So those are the various types of form regions. You can replace the main form, you can replace the entire form, so all pages of the form. You can add a separate form that goes to basically the last page, or you can create an addendum here. So this is the so this one shows up on the bottom half of any one of your inspector windows. And this would also show up in the reading pane. So that's a quick preview of the kinds of things that you can do in Excel. And as I come out of my demo, I'm going to switch over to PowerPoint for the conclusion. All right, so those are things that you can do in Outlook form regions. And here's the coverage of all the different UI elements that we talked about today. The ribbon is something that only exists in Office 2007, and you were able to program against that in either Visual Studio Tools for Office 2005 Second Edition, and also in the new Visual Studio 2008. In the second edition product, we didn't have a visual designer, but we gave you some tools to help you with writing the XML. And with the Actions pane, those have been around for a couple of versions, and we've just made sure that they work really well in 2007, in Office 2007. The Custom Task panes is something that only works in Office 2007, and we made sure that it worked pretty well in the second edition product, and we really made it very robust in 2008. The Outlook form regions were completely do-it-yourself in previous versions of the Visual Studio tools. You had to do quite a bit of work to handle the data marshaling. There is a 17-page white paper telling you how to do the very basics that I just showed you with a couple of clicks. That's the do-it-yourself method of Outlook 2007 form regions. Or you can use the Visual Designer, the Configuration Wizard, import from existing forms, and finally click once deployment. And Word content controls, they used to be very do-it-yourself. Now we have drag and drops, simple data binding, and you can lock the controls. One of the things that they demoed this morning but didn't show you the features of was you can actually lock the controls to make it so that the user, once they're on the screen, they can't be deleted. And that helps prevent your user from messing something up and deleting something that they now can't get back, because those content controls are connected to a data source once you program against them. And so you don't want your end user to hit delete and delete the whole control when they really just meant to basically backspace through all of the text. So those controls are lockable. That means the object can't be deleted, and then you can also lock the content so the words in it can't be deleted either. So we found a lot of people in the legal industry are using these lockable controls to really be able to control the document and prevent the end user from really hurting themselves, and making it so that the programming model doesn't work anymore. All right, some key takeaways. I hope you guys have a pretty strong feeling that Office 2007 is a great programming model. We've produced a lot more places where you, the developer, can include your user interface in the product. And then we've made sure that Visual Studio Tools for Office is the tool that allows you as a professional developer to use .NET tools, strong debugging skills, IntelliSense, and data binding to build your solution. Next steps, you can download for free Beta 2. Of course, as was mentioned this morning, we're going to RTM this month, and you'll be able to get the software with your MSDN subscription. If you don't have an MSDN subscription, we typically put up trial versions, so 30-day versions, maybe a 60-day version of the product for you to download. Now, the Tools for Office piece is not included in the Express SKUs. So if any of you are familiar with Visual Studio Express Edition, you don't get the Office tools in there. You only get it in the Visual Studio Pro and then all of the Team Server SKUs. So you do have to pay money to get this. You don't get it for free in one of the Express SKUs. There's a couple of places where I'd love to get feedback from you. Me and many of my coworkers post on our combined VSTO blog. A couple of people also on my team also maintain their own personal blogs in addition to the team blog. And this is the full URL to the forum. This is a great place to ask a how do I do this and why is this chunk of code not working questions. Really hope to see a lot of you guys in there. And do mention that you saw me at TechEd and you want to know exactly how to get this stuff working. And I or someone else on my team will make sure to answer your question on the forum. I didn't do that. What happened? It reached the end and then went crazy. All right. Oh, thank you very much, everybody. I do hope that you take the time to fill out the evaluation sheets. We do find them very useful. They get used to help determine what kind of sessions you find interesting. So high review scores and large attendance at a session like this means that more Office development sessions will come back in future events. Thank you so much for your time. I will be here for the rest of the week, often at the booth, and immediately after this lecture for additional questions. Thank you very much.